Hi, everybody. Welcome back to part two of our webinar series. I'm here today with JD, and JD is going to be talking, continuing the conversation that we had about build, buy, or borrow. And the next part of the conversation is going to focus on elevating your learning content gain. My name again is Tom Turnbull. I'm VP of Partnerships and Legal at OpenSesame, one of the co-founders of the company. And again, I'm really excited to get a chance to listen to JD talk about some topics that he's very, very knowledgeable of, and I'm hoping to learn a few things today. So thanks, JD. I will turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me today, and thanks for coming back for part two. If this is your part one, you should go watch part one, because this is like a sequel. You don't watch Back to the Future 2 without watching Back to the Future 1, because you're like, why is this car here? Anyway, so in part two of our conversation around modernizing content strategy, we're going to talk about the connection between technology and content. Once you've got right fit content in place, you're curating it from different resources. How do you get it to the people who need it? Then how do you engage people with that content strategy to make sure they understand why they need to reach out and collect and use those resources? And then how do you measure the effectiveness of your content? Talking about this concept of content health. So as Tom said, I'm JD from Axonify. Axonify is a digital communication and training company that focuses on frontline workers. So people who work in retail, delivery drivers, grocery store workers, telecommunications workers, manufacturing, logistics employees. So we provide technology as well as content that helps them solve problems and do their best work every day in a variety of countries and languages around the world. And a lot of people don't know actually that Axonify is a content company. So we have our own Axonify content marketplace that our customers can leverage, as well content that we create, as well as content from a variety of partners, including OpenSesame. So if you're an Axonify user, you can access your OpenSesame content directly in the platform. And if you're an OpenSesame user, you can actually access a selection of Axonify content through their marketplace and use it in your own learning technology if you're not working with Axonify right now. So very exciting partnership, and it really opens the door to a lot of different conversations around, well, how can we help organizations improve their overall content strategy to get better results? So last time, as I said, we discussed a couple of different key topics. So you might want to pause if you're watching recordings and go back, watch that one, come back, watch this one. But what did we talk about before? One, we talked about a lot of the common content obstacles that people face, everything from content being a little bit overstuffed and difficult to consume, slow to build and deploy, keeping up with the pace of change, to making maybe a little bit difficult to access, especially in the flow of work. We talked about 4 key proven principles to building right fit content, aligning your content with a specific business problem, the way learning actually happens from a learning science perspective, making sure that fits into the flow of work, making learning more of a part of the job versus something that people have to step away and do as an extra or add-on to their very busy schedules, and then making sure that your content fits the moment of need, designing resources, whether they be courses, videos, job aids, anywhere in between, the right type of material, the right type of content based on how people need to use it in order to improve their performance. And then we dug into the idea of 3 Bs, the kind of a curation perspective or approach to bring to the ways that you create your content library. So starting with borrowing content, leveraging the wisdom of the crowd, crowdsourcing information from internal and external experts so you can get that content moving more quickly without having to build it yourself, reaching out to proven partners to access their off-the-shelf libraries and buying the right content for those common skills that you may need. And then finally, when it's the right thing to do, building content because the content is very nuanced, so the topic is very specific to your particular organization. And then the idea that you bring those 3 Bs together, so it's not an or situation, it's actually a maybe you build certain content and then buy certain content to ultimately bring together to solve a particular problem. So the 3B approach was a big part of our part 1 conversation. Now at this point, we talked a lot about how do you generate that right fit content, right? The right principles to design right fit materials, curate it from a variety of different sources. So now you have your content to solve your specific problems. The goal is to enable employees, to have an empowered employee. But there's a couple of different pieces from the equation missing, because it's not just about the content. That won't just solve the problem by itself. The first thing we have to think about to close the gap in this equation is how are we getting the content to the employee who needs it? So that's where we need to talk a little bit about technology. Specifically, do you have an integrated technology strategy that aligns well with your modern content strategy too? Because if you have great content, but people can't access it because your technology doesn't work. It doesn't really matter that you have the content, right? Likewise, you could have great technology, but if you don't have great content, what's the point of the investment you made in the platform? So the two ideas really have to snap together. And in part one, we talked about the idea of making sure that your content fits into the flow of work, that people can access it as part of their job using the same technology they use on the job every day, not having to step away from the grocery deli counter, go to that back office no one's ever seen before, to sit down at a computer from 1997 and buffer their way through a course. Nothing devalues content like that basic experience. So how do you, again, take a look at the technology side of your content strategy to make sure you check a couple of key boxes. First, as you evolve your tech stack, make sure your learning technology provides ubiquitous access so that when I need access to the content, whether again, it's a course or a job aid, I can get access to that content where I am in the workflow using the technology I use in the workflow. So that's why we have to understand what the workflow looks like, because if people are using handheld devices or they're using point of sale systems, our content strategy and technology strategies need to match that access point. So making sure that our content is built so that it can be accessed wherever we are using whatever the device may be. Then we have to make sure our technology is enabling a mixed modality approach to content. So it's not just a platform that plays videos, as an example. Does it support more interactive content? Does it support more job aid or checklist type content? So again, we've got the wide variety of different ways we can solve a problem through content. Is our technology able to serve up those different modalities in a way that makes sense? So again, people can use that content at the right time to solve a problem. Then the question of integrated sourcing. We talked about build, buy, and borrow. That means that we're potentially pulling content from different resources. Maybe you're pulling certain information from your company intranet. Maybe you're pulling some off-the-shelf content from OpenSesame. Then you're building content internally using your own authoring tools. Does your learning technology allow you to deliver that integrated collection of content in a simplified way so that the user, the employee, doesn't have to sit there and say, well, where is this content coming from? Well, it's coming from the internet, so I have to go over here to get this content. That doesn't make sense. And frankly, it's not how we use information in our everyday lives. You don't go to Google and search for something and then Google says, well, if it's from this library, you have to go over here and search. And it's much more simplified information experience in our everyday lives. So our learning technology needs to mirror that experience so that all of that great content comes together in a way via the technology. So it's easy for people to get to by focusing on the problem they're trying to solve, not where the content is sourcing from. And then the last piece is dynamic curation, another key consideration for your technology strategy. When you kind of implement a build, buy, borrow curation approach, you potentially blow up your library. So you might go from a world where you have 500 courses in a learning management system to a place where you now have 70,000 content objects. Because again, you're curating, you're bringing in crowdsourced information, you're bringing in third-party courses, you're building your own content. This is actually what happened to me in a previous role when I was supporting a contact center. We had an LMS, we bought some content from a third-party provider, and we built a lot of courses. A couple of years later, we were using a more integrated tech stack, and now I had tens of thousands of articles, courses, job aids, just material all over the place. How does an employee figure out, where do I go? What's the information that's most useful to me to solve the problem I'm trying to address? So making sure you have curation capability in your technology. So whether that's automated, maybe using artificial intelligence to recommend the right content based on a person's individual data profile, and as well as human curation. So that subject matter experts, administrators can come in and snap content together, maybe into paths, so that people know, oh, okay, I'm trying to maybe work on my management skills, or maybe I'm working on selling this new product. So this is a path or curation of content someone's put together for me that's going to help me address that problem. I don't have to go find all of those different pieces and skills on my own. So curation, a huge part of modernizing the technology side of your overall content strategy. So you've got content, you've got technology. The next piece, final piece of our equation to get to that fully empowered employee is engagement strategy. Because a lot of people have a history and there's a bit of a legacy when it comes to the workplace training experience. And in a lot of cases, maybe people haven't had the best time. And maybe you've had a hard time getting people to take that content off the shelf in a regular basis and actually take advantage of it. And something I'm really proud of at Axonify is that we're able to drive extremely high levels of engagement with an audience that's typically really hard to reach on the front line. So broadly speaking, about 83% of Axonify users around the world access training 2 to 3 times per week. So the question becomes, how do we get that level of engagement with an audience that has very little time in their day because they're so customer focused in retail, grocery, manufacturing, contact centers, and whatnot? Here's a behind the scenes look at how we get there. So here are the principles we apply at Axonify in order to drive that level of engagement to, again, get to a fully capable technology experience that's powered by right fit content. So we're kind of building the story as we've gotten to this point by closing those other gaps in the equation. But now here's how we drive that level of engagement. First, we make sure that it's clear we're trying to help you do your job better. This is not training for the sake of training. So the experience itself is narrowed down and very focused on what I need to do today in order to get better at my job. So we're going to mention things like personalization a couple of different times in this list, but it really focuses down on this is not, everyone's not getting the same training. Everyone may be completing training experiences today, but you're getting something that's focused on your particular gaps or challenges that you're facing. And the point is that the training is meant to help you do your job better, not just because training is something that we want you to do. 2, we focus on making things easy to access, easy to use, and easy to consume. So when we build our technology and content experiences, it needs to be as easy as possible. So not sorting through a curricula. Again, I mentioned in previous conversation, how many clicks does it take to play a video in your learning management system? The answer can't be 7, right? I have to log into the platform, make it easy to find. So again, on the device I use in my workflow every day, maybe even on my own personal phone, and we tell the person right up front, this is the experience we think will be the best use of your time today based on what you need to do. And then our technology and content are designed using those learning science principles we talked about in part 1. So that it actually fits the way people learn. We don't overwhelm people. We don't flood people like a fire hose of content. We again focus on a very specific topic using micro-learning type approaches so that it's easy to get through the experience and you're not just overwhelmed with both the complexity of the technology or the amount of content you're facing. 3, we work with our partners within organizations to make sure that learning is prioritized as part of the work. So I mentioned earlier an example that if you only have maybe 3 minutes in a retail associate's day, because they clock in for their shift, they have to get on the sales floor, and it's only a couple of minutes there. We make sure that we work with frontline managers as well as decision makers within the organization to clarify why it's worth the investment of those 3 minutes to engage in training. So it's not just the employee we're building an engagement strategy around, it's also the people who influence how people spend their time. They're critical touch points. And I always say the most important person in any learning and development conversation is the frontline manager, the person who's directly responsible for supporting your audience, because they have so much influence over how people spend their time, what their priorities are, what they're permitted to do, especially in a frontline role. If you don't have their buy-in and alignment, you likely don't have the rest of your audience. So we work with those influencers as well to help them understand how this experience we've designed for technology and content snaps nicely into the work experience in a seamless, frictionless, non-disruptive way. Because that is a big piece of the conversation when it comes to getting people to go access that content, making sure everyone understands you can do this in the time you have allotted. It's not going to require you to physically move away from your job for maybe an hour, which is going to be majorly disruptive to what you're trying to accomplish at work. Number 4, focuses on individual needs. That's why, again, we're drilling down to very specific topics, knowledge, and skill points, because then we can use technology to point the specific content at people who are struggling in those particular areas. So that every time you log into the platform, every time you experience a piece of content, it's the most optimal use of that time because it's focused on something you're working on. So we're not going to give you the same training everyone else is giving you or everyone else is getting because everyone isn't experiencing the same problem. So we make sure through personalization that it's based on what you're struggling with, not what the person next to you maybe is trying to learn. And then finally, we balance the 2 different factors, enjoyability and challenging. Because for some reason, I think a lot of us forgot that learning should be fun. And we create a fun experience in the way that we use things like gamification, game mechanics, challenge, rewards, recognition, all of those different factors. But again, wrapped around everything else we've talked about, because that's the last piece of the puzzle. It's not the first piece of the puzzle. If you have bad content that's not engaging, doesn't solve a business problem, and you wrap gamification around it, it's not a great experience, right? The gamification piece is something that you bring in towards the end of the story that allows people to kind of dive into the parts of the experience they enjoy. Because some people like challenge, they like rewards, they like leaderboards. Some people don't. So we give people the option of what they want to engage with and how they're going to enjoy the experience. And at the same time, make sure it's challenging. The content should not be easy. It should be simple, right? Easy to use, but not easy to complete. Because if I feel like I'm just clicking next to continue to get it done, it's not worth the additional effort. I'm probably not coming back. But if it actually challenges me, makes me think differently, or maybe rethink what I thought I knew. It's actually one of my favorite moments is I used to be actually an Axonify customer several years ago in a contact center environment. And when I deployed Axonify, people would come into my office and challenge me on some of the information because they'd been there for a long time and they believed they knew how certain things were done. But by using this type of an approach, it's very targeted and challenging people on their knowledge, they started to realize maybe they hadn't kept up with the information. They had to, again, rethink some things. And we challenged some established expertise in that way. So that's why with the question-based approach that we use that, again, really focuses on reinforcing and challenging people's knowledge, it adds additional value to the experience because you're not just coming to consume content, you're coming to see, can you prove what you know and then continue your progression by proving what you know over time. So again, a couple of key attributes or kind of things we keep in mind as we design that kind of integrated technology and content experience that drives the level of engagement that we see that you said is very high when it comes to the learning technology space. There's one more piece of the puzzle when it comes to engagement strategy. You have to tell people that the experience is there and that it's of great value and that they should come give it a try. Again, especially if maybe they've had challenges with legacy training experiences. They've gone to stuff in the past, didn't quite hit the mark, didn't feel like it was for them. They were kind of bored with the experience. Right now, people are a bit zoomed out or digital contented out, if you will, in a lot of cases. So how do you convince someone that it's worth it this time? Or that you've made upgrades, right? You've upgraded your content experience. Maybe you've upgraded your technology experience. They should come back and try it again. How do you sell people on kind of the new vision of your content strategy? In my experience, the answer is almost never have the training team tell them it's a good thing to do. Right? We're excited about it. This is what we do. But are we the right people to send that message? In my experience, usually not. At the same time, it's also not the executive team. You definitely want buy-in. You definitely want the executives supporting the effort that you're making, the investments that you're making. But a top-down approach, in my experience, isn't the best way to go about it. You need the training team, HR team, executive team, all bought in. But it really is from the ground up is where I find the most success, is that as you're evolving your content and technology strategy, working with the people in your audience. So the frontline employees, right? The management team, that first layer of employee, building champions within your audience so that they, in the early phases of what you're doing, see the value. They see that it's an enjoyable experience. They had fun with this type of training. And that most importantly, it helped them do their jobs better. And they kept coming back. And some of the best marketing messages I've ever used as a learning and development professional were from my audience and their anecdotal evidence, as well as the data that I'm collecting, turning that around and facing that towards the audience to overcome a lot of those legacy issues or those obstacles, because they see people like them who are struggling with the same types of issues and trying to reach the same types of goals, getting to that point because they're using this content, because they're engaging in training in this way. So instead of me saying learning science or learning theory, or we have a content strategy, or an executive saying training is a very important part of our business strategy. You want all of those things, but having someone next to you who does your job, who faces the same challenges you do every day, say, hey, have you checked this out? This is really helping me. It doesn't get better than that from a communication and engagement strategy perspective. So what my overall point there is to make sure that communication is a key part of really bringing your content strategy to life and making sure that you build champions across the organization, but especially within the audience, because they have the real understanding of how your investment in training and content and technology is going to help people move the needle when it comes to their performance. Communication is good. It's a good summary point there. So we've completed our equation. So we've built right fit content. We have the integrated technology to deliver that content to the right people at the right time. We have an engagement strategy that gets people up and moving and excited and reaching in to grab that content so they can use it to improve their performance and empower them to become better at their jobs. Last question, last topic for our conversation is, how do you know it's working? How do you measure the effectiveness of your content strategy? And we use an idea that we call content health. So the idea here is we're trying to take a step beyond the typical ways that a lot of people measure training. In a lot of cases, we're still relying on antiquated measures like completions, test scores, maybe a survey. Did people like it? Did they not like it? Do they intend to use the training on the job, right? We have very limited data in a lot of cases when it comes to the effectiveness of training. So when you look at things from a content health perspective, it's a more multidimensional way to assess the impact and value of your content investment. So there are a couple key factors that we look at. And again, the actual measurables are different depending on the organization because you may have different data, different tools, solving different problems, but overall, the idea applies to different types of businesses. So we look at things like availability, right? Do you have the right resources available to solve the problems people are looking for, right? Can people find the information they need based on the issues that they're addressing and what they want to learn and what skills they want to develop? Is your content fresh? Are you keeping pace with change, right? That's the content management side of the story. As the business evolves, is your content strategy keeping up? Do you have engagement? Are people using the content? Are they logging in to your learning systems, reaching in to your libraries on a consistent basis based on how much engagement you expect to see based on your content strategy? Are people getting better? Are they learning? Is their knowledge going up? Are their on-the-job behaviors changing? Is their performance improving? And then are you seeing the results of that in your business measurement? Are you seeing KPIs improve? Are you seeing a business impact as a result of your content strategy? And then finally, sentiment. We do still want to know, do people like the experience? Do they like the content? Do they enjoy it? Do they have fun? Are there certain pieces that they would want to give feedback on that maybe they think it could be a little bit better if you made certain improvements? So we look at those different dimensions and we basically score those dimensions on a grid. And we say, well, maybe we have high availability because when people are searching, there are content libraries, they're finding the resources that they're engaging with very quickly. So we don't have people looking around, browsing around very much. They're getting to what they need and they're getting to it quickly. Great, high availability. Freshness, maybe we're running into problems when it comes to keeping content updated. We're putting a lot of resources into the content management. We're struggling to keep pace with business change. Maybe our freshness is a little bit low. Or it could be low because maybe people have consumed a lot of your content and they're actually looking for more and you don't quite have it there. So content freshness is kind of a dynamic measurement. Engagement, maybe again, people are coming back. We talked about Axonify engagement. Maybe you're seeing 80, 90% of people continuously coming back for training. So you've got high engagement. Progression, maybe you're middle of the pack. Maybe you haven't seen people's knowledge quite improve. Maybe they started at a baseline and they've only jumped a little bit when it comes to their proven knowledge. So that would allow you to go in and say, well, let's take a look at the content. Is it too hard? Are people not figuring out the pieces? Maybe it was too easy. They started at a really high baseline knowledge and they haven't improved much because the content missed the mark because it was just too easy. Business impact, again, taking a look at your business results from your business partners and saying, are we seeing the results when it comes to improving safety, improving sales, whatever your business measurement may be, bringing that into the story. And then sentiment, what type of feedback are you getting from your audience? So the idea here is that on a dashboard type view, you can bring all those elements together and take a look at it for a single piece of content. You could look at content health for an overall program, or maybe your overall content strategy, and then drill in to understand where you can make proactive changes to make sure that your content strategy is as healthy and impactful as possible, rather than just relying on, well, did people do it? Did they get a score that one time? And then did they like it? That doesn't tell you enough about the value of the investment you're making when it comes to your approach to content. So content health might be a new idea, but it's something we work with different organizations to really take a look at their overall health when it comes to engaging in content with Axonify to make sure they're getting their maximum value out of the overall training experience.
Hey, JD, on the specific items of progression and impact, do you guys have recommendations that you bring to your customers? These are topics that we discuss with our customers all the time, and we find that maybe these are the areas where there's the least level of sophistication or thought that's there, and wondering how you're handling those discussions on those two items specifically.
Sure. When it comes to progression, that really benefits from making sure that content strategy and training strategy overall isn't a one and done approach. Because if people only experience training at one point in time when they go to the class the first time, there's only so much you can measure in that experience. And we talked about early on, people forget a lot of information. People may not have the opportunity to apply that information for a while. So training has to be a continuous experience so that I'm measuring change incrementally over time. So that's why with Axonify, we do a lot of question-based reinforcement, because after you maybe complete a training course, and then we start to pulse check you and ask you questions over time that get increasingly more difficult, we're measuring your change in knowledge over time to figure out, is the training working? Or is it not working? How quickly is it working? And then we combine that type of knowledge data with real world performance data. So maybe behavior observation is an example. Maybe you work in a contact center and there's call quality evaluations that take place. All the different types of data sources you have that demonstrate if people are doing the things you expect them to do on the job. We'll also bring in that type of data in order to measure, again, incremental improvements or declines over time to start connecting the dots to say, well, is the training influencing these changes or is it not? And then the same goes for impact. So we kind of build the equation of measurement over time to say, let's measure people's knowledge changes, let's measure their on-the-job performance changes, and now let's combine all of that data with business impact data. So the sales outcome you want to see, the customer success outcome you want to see. And if we pull in that data, and then again, the key is measuring it over time, not just saying we measured it here, we measured it 6 months later, sales went up, the training must have worked. Mm-hmm. That's not how anything works. When you measure more granularly over time and you can see subtle changes taking place and connect the dots to understand what not just the correlation is, but what the causation is behind that. And we do it with a product we use called Impact and Axonify. You can create really strong linkages and then again, get more proactive, because as you see things not going in the direction you want them to go, you don't have to wait until the end. As you see trends starting to take place, you can step in and upgrade your content, shift the technology experience, whatever nudges you need to make in order to make sure that you're going to get to the goal you're trying to achieve. But measurement, whole nother hour worth of at least conversation.
That's amazing stuff.
Yeah, it gives you a sense.
That's a business in and of itself. That's all really interesting, super important stuff.
But the key is that whole measurement thing I just kind of outlined at a high level doesn't work if you first don't solve the pieces we've talked about during our 2 sessions together at this point, which is you got to have the right content designed in the right way to meet the needs of the audience, to fit in the experience of the audience, and then be delivered via technology that allows you to do a lot of the things we've talked about in terms of driving engagement and driving measurement. So all the pieces need to come together. Measurement won't work without the right content. Content won't work without the right measurement. It's all part of an overarching strategy. We've really drilled into the content side during our time together here.
I see another section in the future.
Part 3 coming in 2022. But at this point, that's a great place to wrap up. So again, over our time, we've talked about really 5 key practices when it comes to elevating your content strategy. 1, designing that learning content that really fits how learning works, specific business problems, the workflow, the moment of need. The 3 Bs, starting with borrowing content, crowdsourcing the wisdom of your subject matter expertise, then buying content on the right skills, those foundational capabilities that are not unique to your specific business. Then when it's only the right thing to do, using your unique talent and the resources you have to build the right resources. Making sure you have the right integrated technology experience to serve up that content in a way that's easy to access and easy to engage with from your audience. Driving engagement to that content so you can build value and build trust with the people that you support. And then making sure you're continuously measuring your content health to make sure you're getting the most out of your investment. Because as we said in the beginning, one of the biggest obstacles people often face when it comes to content is it takes a lot of time and it's a big investment. So you want to make sure you get the most out of that investment. And hopefully you see through our conversations here that it really takes an integrated strategy that is very achievable to get to that next level when it comes to elevating your content game. And to kind of wrap up, the key point, hopefully what you walk away with is if you apply these ideas we've talked about, you can get faster and more agile, so you can accelerate your solutions, keep pace with change within your organization, reduce the overall amount of effort because you're only going to build in certain areas, so you can reduce the overall amount of investment when it comes to different parts of your content strategy, maximize the value when you do make an investment to make sure you're building, borrowing, or buying the right things that matter, and then driving impact and validating that impact with meaningful measurement. So if you still want to talk more content, make sure to come over to Axonify Live, where Spencer Thornton from OpenSesame and myself will dive into this conversation from a bit of a different angle. We're going to really focus on closing the content gap when it comes to the frontline workforce. So make sure to check out Axonify Live for that session and all the other sessions we have talking about improving the overall frontline employee experience.
Thank you so much, JD. I really enjoyed learning from you today, and thanks to the audience for joining us. We really appreciate and value your time. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Tom. And at any point, anyone out there, if you have any questions, feel free, reach out to myself, reach out to Tom. Always happy to help out. Again, thank you so much to Tom and his team at OpenSesame. Thanks to my team at Axonify. Thanks to you for hanging out with us for 2 parts of our conversation. If you didn't watch part 1, go back, watch it now. Grab some popcorn. It's enjoyable, I swear. With that said, thank you again.
Watch it 3 times. Yeah.
You know, binge watch it. The whole family will enjoy your content strategy
Biggest
webinar.
thing since Ted Lasso. Yeah.
Overpromise, but that's okay. That's thanks everybody. Be well. Have a great rest of your day. Bye now.